When I think back to the summer I was 13, I still can't understand how something so ordinary, something so small, could spiral into a terrifying event that changed my life forever. It's strange how you think you know everything about your own life until something happens that shatters that illusion. This is the story of how a visit to a relative's house turned into a nightmare I never saw coming, and how I unknowingly brought home a curse that would haunt me for years. My name is Sarah, and I was a typical 13-year-old girl growing up in the suburbs of California. I had a good life, loving parents, a little brother, and plenty of friends. We lived in a quiet neighborhood where nothing really ever seemed to happen. I had everything I could want, but there was always something about the countryside that fascinated me. So, when my aunt invited me to spend my summer vacation with her in Northern California, I was thrilled. It was a small town, surrounded by forests and quiet fields. It seemed like the perfect place to escape from the hustle of city life. The journey to my aunt's house was long. My father, a man of few words, always warned me about traveling to rural areas, saying the world there was different, slower, quieter, and sometimes a little darker. I didn't understand what he meant then, but I soon would. When I arrived, my aunt greeted me with open arms. Her house was old, yet charming. It sat on a few acres of land, and you could hear the wind whistling through the trees and the occasional rustle of leaves. My cousins, Emma and Lily, were around my age, and we immediately became inseparable. We spent our days playing outside, exploring the forests, and swimming in the nearby river. My aunt made the best homemade meals, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and the most delicious desserts. It felt like a world away from the crowded city streets I was used to. As the days passed, I started to feel more and more at home. I was fascinated by my aunt's lifestyle. She had a small garden where she grew vegetables, and she would often spend hours tending to it. Her daughters helped her with the housework, which included sewing and weaving. It was a simpler life, one that I began to admire, even if I knew I could never fully adapt to it. There was a sense of calm in the air that made me feel like I had found my place. Toward the end of my visit, my aunt gave me several gifts. She handed me some clothes that had been handmade by her daughters. The fabric was soft, and the stitching was flawless. There were new skirts, dresses, and even a few pairs of shoes. But what really caught my attention were the earrings she gave me. They were small, delicate, and beautiful. I couldn't wait to wear them back home in the city. She also gave me a set of traditional jewelry, passed down through generations. My aunt explained that it had belonged to her mother, who had passed away a few years ago. She said it was a family heirloom, one that held sentimental value, but I didn't know much about its history. It seemed like a gift of love, a gesture to remind me of the connection between our families. When I returned home, I was excited to show my parents everything my aunt had given me. I eagerly pulled out the clothes, the jewelry, and the little trinkets she had packed for me. My parents were impressed, especially my father, who took a long look at the clothes and smiled, pleased with how much I had enjoyed my time at my aunt's house. But something changed in me after that trip. It wasn't immediate, but it happened slowly over time. At first, I thought it was just a phase. Maybe I was adjusting to being back home after so much time away. But as days passed, I realized that I wasn't the same person I had been before. My behavior changed, my mood darkened, and I found myself withdrawing from my family. I began to feel disconnected from everything around me. My once tight relationship with my little brother started to strain. The jealousy I had always kept hidden inside me now surfaced with a vengeance. My brother, only 8 years old, seemed to get more attention than I did, and I couldn't shake the feeling that my parents loved him more. It wasn't a feeling I could explain, but it gnawed at me. Every time my father smiled at him or praised him for something, a deep, unfamiliar bitterness would rise within me. I wasn't sure why I felt this way, but it consumed me. One evening, after an argument with my brother, I did something I never thought I was capable of. It was like an invisible force was controlling me. My brother had taunted me one too many times, and I snapped. I grabbed the money my father had kept in his wallet and, without thinking, locked him in the bathroom. I packed my things quickly, clothes, the jewelry my aunt had given me, and everything I could carry, and ran out of the house. I don't know why I did it. Maybe it was the jealousy. Maybe it was the anger I felt building up over the past few days. But I didn't care. I was done with everything. I didn't want to be a part of this family anymore. I didn't want to be a part of this life. I walked down the street, heading toward the bus stop, and soon found myself at the train station. I had no destination in mind. I just wanted to leave. I boarded a train without thinking, and as the train pulled away from the station, I felt a strange sense of freedom. But that feeling was fleeting. As the hours passed, I started to feel more and more uncomfortable. What had I done? I was only 13. I didn't even know how to survive on my own. And yet, there I was, on a train heading to God knows where. When I reached a small town, I realized how truly alone I was. I had no money left, and I didn't know anyone in this strange place. I wandered the streets for a while, trying to figure out what to do next, but my mind was foggy. I felt lost, both physically and emotionally. That was when I called my mother. Her reaction wasn't what I had expected. She wasn't upset or worried. It was as if she didn't care that I had run away. Her words were cold, detached, and it made me feel like I didn't matter. "Don't do anything foolish," she said before hanging up. That was it. She didn't ask where I was or why I had done it. She didn't even ask if I was okay. The lack of concern made me feel even more isolated. I sat at the train station, unsure of what to do. Then I called my father. His response was similarly indifferent. "Well, you've made your choice," he said. "If you want to go, go. But don't expect me to come running after you." It was in that moment that I realized something wasn't right. I felt like I was no longer a part of my family, like I was an outsider looking in. The loneliness was suffocating, and the anger that had driven me to leave now turned into regret. I sat at the station for hours, crying, trying to make sense of everything. After what felt like an eternity, I called my father again. This time, he told me to go to the nearest police station and tell them everything. I did as he said, and the police helped me get in touch with an NGO. The next day, I was sent to a shelter near my home, and my father picked me up. When I finally returned home, I was greeted with the news of something I couldn't believe. My uncle, my aunt's husband, had tried to take his own life. He had turned on the gas in the kitchen and lit a match, hoping to end it all. But something had stopped him. My father later learned that my uncle had been looking at the clothes I had brought back from my aunt's house when he made that decision. It turned out that the clothes I had brought back were part of a cursed collection clothes that had been part of the last rites of a distant relative. These clothes had absorbed negative energy, and it was that energy that had affected me, and later, my uncle. My father consulted with a spiritual healer who confirmed that the clothes had a dark presence. He advised my father to burn them immediately, and so he did. Once the clothes were destroyed, things began to return to normal. My uncle's mood lifted, and I no longer felt the strange pull to my aunt's houses. The curse, it seemed, had been lifted. Looking back on that summer, I can't help but feel a sense of unease. The gifts my aunt gave me were meant with love, but the clothes she had given me unknowingly carried with them something far darker. I learned an important lesson. Even the things we think are harmless, the gifts we cherish, can sometimes come with hidden dangers. It's a reminder to always be cautious, even with the ones we trust the most. This is my story, and I share it to warn others. Sometimes, the supernatural isn't as far away as we think. It can creep into our lives in the most unexpected ways, and when it does, it's often too late to turn back.